In a remote village in northern Italy, there was an abandoned monastery that no one dared to enter. The locals told stories of how at night, the shadows would move on their own, and travelers would hear faint mocking laughter echoing through the halls. Marco, a young journalist who was fascinated by the paranormal, decided to spend a night in the monastery to document the stories for his channel. As the sun set, he set up his camera and waited. An hour passed with nothing happening. Just as he was about to call it a night, he heard a loud crash from upstairs. Marco investigated and found that one of the stone gargoyles had fallen off the roof. He decided to place the camera on the ground floor and go to sleep. In the morning, he checked the footage and found that during the night, the camera had moved on its own several times and even captured an image of a shadow figure. Marco was terrified and never went back. Suddenly, a whisper echoed. "Why are you here?" Marco froze. The voice was soft, almost playful, but carried a weight that made his chest tighten. He swung his flashlight around, but the hall appeared empty. There was no one in sight. He continued on to the library where piles of dusty books lined the shelves. Some books lay open as if someone had just been reading them. Marco felt a chill crawl up his spine. This place gave him the creeps. He remembered hearing stories about this place as a kid. The old caretaker who lived in the mansion next door would come over and tell them scary stories about the house. Apparently, there were ghosts that made regular appearances, moving objects, shaking beds, even interacting with people. As Marco turned to leave, he noticed something strange. The door behind him had appeared out of nowhere. He had just been standing in a hallway, but now there was a door where there shouldn't be one. And on the other side of the door, he could see a faint light. Armed with only a flashlight, camera, and a notebook, he stepped through the crumbling gates just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air inside was cold and stale, carrying a faint scent of decay. He found the main hall and approached the altar. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, and the only light source was the beam from his flashlight, which revealed broken pieces of what used to be a beautiful stained glass window. As he moved deeper into the church, he noticed that the shadows shifted strangely, stretching and contorting along the walls. He continued on, his heart pounding in his chest, and reached the first pew. It was overturned, as if someone had been sitting in it just recently. He took a deep breath and began to write in his notebook. Just then, a floorboard creaked above him. He looked up to see a shadow falling over him. It was a tall, dark shape that seemed to be watching him. The old bookstore smelled like dust and regret. Marco ran his fingers over the spines of the books, their titles long faded. One in particular caught his eye, a leather-bound volume with no title. He opened it, and the words seemed to shift before his eyes, forming sentences in languages he didn't recognize. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement. A tall, thin figure glided across the room. Silent and ethereal, it moved with a strange grace. Marco stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. But when he turned to face it, the figure was gone. He tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over him. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. But as he turned back to the book, the words had shifted again, forming a new sentence. This time, he did recognize the language. "Beware," it said, "for I am the keeper of lost souls." The whispers started low, but they were growing louder now, surrounding him. Leave or stay forever. He didn't know what they meant, but he didn't want to stay and find out. So he ran. He ran through the corridors of the old monastery, past the rooms with the living shadows. And each turn seemed to lead him back to the same rooms again and again. It was like the monastery was folding in on itself, the corridors twisting like a maze. And then he heard them behind him, those whispers. They were getting louder, more insistent. Leave. Or stay forever. He didn't dare look back. He just kept running until he collapsed into the chapel, gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. But even in the safety of the chapel, he could feel their eyes on him, those soulless eyes staring into his. And he knew that no matter where he went, they would always be there, those whispers, those shadows. He was trapped in a nightmare, and there was no escape. The moonlight streamed through the broken stained glass window, illuminating a dusty altar. And there in the center, he saw dozens of shadows converging. forming faces with hollow eyes that stared back at him silently. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows moved closer, enveloping him in a cold, suffocating darkness. In a final desperate effort, Marco raised his flashlight high, illuminating the faces around him. Some were snarling, some were crying, and some seemed to be whispering secrets to each other. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, and all the faces turned towards him, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. Marco stumbled back, knocking over a nearby candle. It hit the floor and rolled towards the altar. The flame danced and flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the wall behind him. And as he watched in horror, the shadows grew longer and consumed him completely. The light pierced the shadows for a moment, revealing a message scrawled across the altar in faded red letters. "You are never alone." Trembling, he stumbled out of the hall and ran through the endless corridors. By the time he reached the main gate, the fog had swallowed the castle whole. When he looked back, it seemed smaller, almost unreal. He stopped running and turned to face the forest, the trees looming over him like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. The wind whispered through the leaves, sending shivers down his spine. He was alone, completely alone, or was he? As he stepped into the clearing, the fog began to lift and the trees parted, revealing a path. A single ray of sunlight illuminated the ground before him, guiding him forward. He took a deep breath and started walking towards the light. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the trees. "Who goes there?" He froze in his tracks. Was he really alone? Or were the shadows playing tricks on him? Marco never spoke of what he saw, but sometimes, at night, he hears faint whispers and feels a cold breeze, reminding him that some places are better left forgotten. He'd been an artist, spending his days drawing the faces of the locals in the town square. But it was the faces in the old monastery that had haunted him, the weathered faces of monks frozen in time, their eyes hollowed out, their skin stretched tight over their bones. He'd filled a notebook with sketches of the faces he saw, convinced that the monastery held secrets beyond comprehension. But as the years passed, the memory of those eyes faded, leaving him with only the whisper of their voices in the dead of night. He could still feel the icy grip of fear as he turned the final page of the notebook, a warning to stay away from the dark and forgotten corners of the world. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Creepy Nights for more chilling horror stories and spine-tingling tales.